So this is really going to be an exciting afternoon because what we're going to go through is a really deep understanding of what the applications are to what you learned last night. Now, how many people were able to meditate this morning? Some? And did everyone feel that they could get into this quiet state, an expanded state? Some? See how many people? Yeah, maybe half, 2/3. It's also fun to do it in water. So if you sit in the pools or sort of and just sit and meditate, there's a hot tub where I'm staying that I did that in yesterday afternoon. It's just very relaxing, and just enjoy it. Have fun with it. What this session is about is taking the understanding and the experience you're beginning to have in meditative states, remembering that meditative states are really for the purpose of experiencing the true nature of what's already there. It's really about allowing yourself to get out of the way of yourself. Does this make sense? It reminds me of this great story from the ancient Sufi tradition where there was a master teaching his students how to walk on water and levitate across the water. And there was a guy there, and he was going, I'm afraid of drowning, and I'm heavier than the water, and I'm going to get out there and sink, and this and that and the other thing. And it was all ego and fear and ego and fear and more fear and ego. And the master turned to him and said, leave thyself behind, and then walk upon the water. So you leave yourself behind, and then do anything. It's the Zen of meditation, it's the Zen of contact, and it's also the Zen of remote viewing. It's incredibly easy if you're childlike and playful with it and just let it flow, as opposed to being so serious and diligent. We're going to be very serious and diligent because we're adults now. So there's a childlike playfulness with this that needs to come into it, where you can just say, oh, I can do this, because you can. And if you believe you can, you will. And it's interesting because what they've done with random number generators, where they're spitting out zeros and ones in a 50-50 distribution under random conditions, when people put their awareness on it and they just go, wow, this is cool, there'll be this huge spike consistently, way against any probabilities, in say a 0 or a 1, depending on what they're intending. But the next time the person tries, in many cases, because then the ego kicks in and goes, wow, I can do this, and then they intellectualize it, it plummets. Why is that? It's because the self, the ego, has gotten in the way of the flow consciousness. Does this make sense? All right, get it? So same thing with CE5, when you're making contact and communicating with these interstellar civilizations. There's sort of a grace and a zen of doing it, where you just know you can do it. And if you believe you can do it, you will. And if the ego kicks in and you start intellectualizing it and editorializing it, it blocks that flow of non-locality. And the same thing for remote viewing. If I want to remote view my youngest daughter and wife right now in Richmond, I just click into it and see where they are. And I know what they're, just boom. It's easy, simple. Yeah. Oh, yes, in real time, on the fly, driving down the highway. Where are the police? Haven't had a ticket in 30 or 40 years. I just click. Virginia. You're talking fascistic. We're talking the fascistic state of Virginia. Well, we had a rental property in Richmond. And there were some college dudes who were renting it, smoked a joint. They came in with a SWAT team, tore the whole door apart. I got a notice, listen to this, about governmental fascistic behavior. Emily and I got a notice that we would be arrested if anyone smoked in one of our rental properties again, pot, because we were the owners of the property and we were facilitating drug use. This is in the city of Richmond in Virginia. I'm talking about jackbooted thugs. So don't get me started about this kind of stuff. But, I need a Sirius XM channel and unplug me. It won't be purdy. But all right, yeah. So Uh, no, but you can use this anytime, anywhere. And this is what's beautiful about the understanding of it. And one of the stories I like to tell is the near-death experience I had. And afterwards, I went, gosh, there's got to be a way to have that cosmic consciousness experience without having to die. I said, it was great that I died and came back, I guess, although I'd have preferred to stay out where I was. It was so beautiful, beautiful. But to be on this plane in the material world at this time in human evolution, stuck in a reductionist material, brutalized world of industrial schlock, wasn't great, and I wasn't happy about it. And so I said, I need to find a way to get back to that. So I started searching for things, and I found this meditation course, and I'll never forget. The guy did the puja, and we sit down, and we're sitting, and he gives me a mantra, different from the one I gave you guys. One I gave you is a very advanced one. And I'm there in this quiet state, and I just transcend into pure consciousness, and I completely transcended. Everything receded, and I went into this pure, unbounded mind. It was so beautiful and blissful. And afterwards, he says, okay, let's open the eyes, and he looked at me. He says, you transcended, didn't you? And this is on my 18th birthday, June 28th, 1973. I go, well, isn't what we were supposed to do? I hadn't overthought it to the point that I had to make this a big gashrai, like some kind of a huge big deal about it. I just thought, well, yeah, this is normal, this is natural, why not sit and do it? And so most people overthink it, but also they don't believe they can do it. And that's the beginning of programming yourself for failure. So what we want to do is hit the reset button, reprogram ourselves for success and for being able to do it. And if you believe you can do it, you will. And all I'm going to do is help you remember who you really are and give you some techniques that facilitate the sharpening of that ability. That's really all I can do. The rest you're doing yourself. But this one I'm sharing right now is key to understanding the psychological and even physical dynamics of consciousness and non-locality and how it can be manifested. Whatever the city is, SIDDHIS. The cities, whether it's remote viewing, which is a pop culture term for the ability to be a seer of a remote place or a remote time into the future, or levitation, or materializing objects, or communicating with interstellar civilizations and having contact. These are all cities. And they're all easily accomplished if you understand the science and the fundamental knowledge of consciousness, its nature, and how you begin to manifest it by basically being childlike and letting it flow through you and having fun with it and knowing you can do it. As soon as you accept that and get out of the grim, I don't know, I'm not Ingo Swann and I can't do this. If you're programmed that way and you believe that about yourself, there's nothing I can do to help you. So empower yourself to be who you are, and that is become the person that you actually are and let this other rubbish fall away. Leave this kind of stuff of yourself behind and walk upon the water, and let's fly together, right? Yeah. All right? Yeah. So that's an important dynamic, and if you take nothing away from this entire weekend besides these techniques and what I just said, it will hold you in very good stead. And there are enormous practical implications for this. How many people in here are medical doctors or what I call critical, like pilots, airline pilots, doctors? I'm just life and death, special forces folks. ER nurse, love ya. An ER nurse, love them, love them, love them, love them. They're awesome. Worth their weight in Uber Platinum. Believe me, believe me. when I left the hospital where I was and chairman, the nurses all wept because we were such a team. And I was kind of, when the really nasty surgeons and orthopedic people would abuse them, I'd go in there and just stand behind them and go, leave my nurses alone. And this one little one had a bad case of LMS, which is little man syndrome. I literally picked him up, ejecting him out of the room. Anyway, chairman of surgery. Anyway, so nurses are awesome. So those of you who are in critical, remember that there's science, and there's objective knowledge and intellect, and then there's the consciousness that can sense and feel and know. And if you develop this ability, you will save lives, more lives. And in your normal everyday work, whoever you are, I mean, if you're a teacher and you're dealing with a student, intuiting what that person needs and what you need to teach and do, there's a level where we have our intellect and scientific knowledge, which is totally valid, but it can be greatly augmented by the primary operating system we have, and that's this expanded aspect of consciousness. And I remember the time there was a 26-year-old male that came into the ER with the flu. And he had all the symptoms, I say the flu in parentheses. And he had all the symptoms of the flu, fever, chills, he'd been nauseated, and myalgias, and it was flu season. So the nurse put him in a regular room because he had a bad flu, some amantadine, and out the door you go. OTD, out the door. I went in there, and you know how golden retrievers can kind of have been trained to pick up melanomas and stuff? Well, I'm kind of like that. So I went in there and I sensed in his head a brain tumor. And you can't just blurt that out to someone with no objective findings. There were no objective findings. There's no neurological findings, nothing. And so I ordered, thank God I didn't have to go through the medical Nazis and gatekeepers and the government and insurance companies. I just turned to the nurse and I said, I need a stat CT of the head, CAT scan of the head. And it was great. It was this country nurse who went, well, Dr. Greer, he only has the flu. And I said, and her name was Bubbles. We called her Bubbles. I said, Bubbles, just do it. And so they did. And I explained that there was just some things I wanted to check out. I was, the radiologists usually, were very slow to get back to you unless it was something really bad and critical. And I get a call back, emergency call back from the radiologist. He has a massive astrocytoma, which is a type of brain tumor that was like a pancake between the skull and on top of the brain, but it caused so much pressure. He was herniating his brainstem, causing his fever, hitting the chemotactic trigger zone for nausea and vomiting, and everything else. But he had no focal neurological findings, pupils, function, motor, sensory. It was just that. So it masked as a flu, and if I had sent him out the door, he probably would have herniated and died within a day or two. And he went to emergency neurosurgery and is alive now and fine. He used to come in, months later and with his kids. He had two children. And the neurosurgeon, interestingly, called me and said, hey, Steve, why did you even get a CAT scan on this guy? I wouldn't even have thought to get a CAT scan on him. I said, well, I just had a hunch. I couldn't tell him that I had remote viewed a brain tumor. I mean, I'd lose my license. But this is what we need to be teaching our children and our, doctors and our PhD people, so that we don't say, it's not a choice. It's not this ridiculous choice people make. It's either between science and objective means of exploration and knowledge, or consciousness development and intuition. It's both together. And when you put both together, that's who you want to have as your physician, or your pilot, or your whoever. So this has enormous practical applications above and beyond, or maybe not above and beyond, but in addition to being an ambassador to the universe. Because if you develop this capability, it's going to inform and influence every part of your life, no matter what you're doing, no matter how trivial and mundane it may seem to be. Or, you know, a few years ago, I was driving through around Glacier National Park, and I was going near Helena, and I'm driving along the highway, and almost like an override vision came into my mind. My eyes are open. I'm not meditating. Boom. 2 cars in an intersection with a really horrific accident. About 45 minutes, an hour later, I came to a 4-way stop like they have all around here. Very dangerous intersections, by the way, out in the country. And there was a SUV, a Suburban, that had run through a stop sign and broadsided a Ford Taurus, and tourists who had come in from Germany who were going to Glacier National Park. Both of them were dead on the scene immediately. And the others were close to that. And I was the first person to get upon this accident. Now, I was so convinced I was going to come across this, I started looking around the car for straws, bandages, rags, clothes, anything I would have, because I knew that this was going to happen, and it did. And so anyway, we got the helicopters in, and I was there with the paramedics, and the other 2 people lived. But that is just one example, and I could give you thousands of examples like that. And it isn't that, you know, this isn't something everyone can begin to do where you function in an awake state. And it has implications for avoiding disasters or having wonderful things happen or being just incredibly efficient and effective in what you're doing in your day-to-day work and life. But when you're talking about interstellar contact, see, they're operating on that level all the time, because there are civilizations that have existed where they've had complete abundance. So let's back this up for a minute. We're working, and I've actually out here had about half a dozen meetings with high net worth corporations and people seriously interested in funding and moving forward with free energy, zero-point energy stuff. Amazing. And let's say that in a generation, there is no more poverty on the earth. And pollution is just like a nightmare. I mean, it's like the era of slavery or the Stone Age or whatever, or the Inquisition. All that becomes a historical footnote. And our civilization is functioning the way it should have been for the last 100 years, what I call this lost century. With that level of abundance and no pollution, our footprint on Gaia will be very gentle, because there'll be 100% recycling, and eventually we'll get to what I call transdimensional manufacturing. Do you want to know how ETs make things? Should we get into that? Because this is actually a consciousness-assisted technology. So, you know, this microphone and all this stuff has been, we cut down a tree for this. The metal was dug out of the earth, you know, Neanderthal-like, and smelted down and made into metal, and then it's riveted together in bolts and screws. Transdimensional interstellar civilizations, which means the ones that are here and have exceeded the speed of light, have mastered the sciences of transdimensional manufacturing. To wit, they are able to create a standing resonant sonic energy field that is almost like an architectural blueprint of something, like 3D printing, but this is like 4 or 5D printing. Get it? And in that resonant field, then materialize the object, the spacecraft, the piece of clothing, from the transdimensional interface, energetic interface, with subatomic space-time matter, so that the molecules, the atoms, the structures, everything in that is coming through into this dimension of 3D from that deeper interface from another dimension, an energy field, and it just materializes it. Now, the word materializes, no one thinks what that means. It's to make material, but you're assembling it from these elementals. I call them the elementals that are subatomic, and then way in past the even 0 point energy field, which is infinite energy, as Tesla said. The Dirac sea, as Professor Dirac said. But in that pluripotent state, you can recruit pure gold, pure platinum, iron, any metal, and biologicals, what have you. So you can then manifest that. And what you have just heard, I would say a handful of people on Earth know, even in classified projects. It's highly compartmented. This is really way past TS-SCI, top secret special compartmented intelligence. But that's how they happen. And this is why, you know, when occasionally after we've hit a scalar weapon, electromagnetic weapon, and made one of these craft crash and downed them, by the way, we've been doing that. The early testing of it was Roswell. That spacecraft, or two of them that crashed, was the result of a, quote, radar dome, this FBI document that we got and put out, which is now the #1 viewed document on the FBI website now. And it's an official document from a field agent writing to J. Edgar Hoover talking about what happened at Roswell, and that apparently it crashed because of a new radar system we put in. Well, I can assure you that an interstellar vehicle, and there are two of them, who are doing surveillance of our only atomic bombs squadron in the world, which is where Roswell was at the time in 1947, doesn't crash because we have a new radar system. It was a radar system that had embedded in it a longitudinal scalar, faster than the speed of light weapon system, which we'll get into if you want to hear. If you're a physicist and want to talk to me, but most people, basically, the light you're looking at is a wave. You know that? A laser is like a green laser, is that wavelength all synchronized coherently, coherent light. Longitudinal electromagnetic systems are a point and longitudinal, and there's no wave component. And they're multiples of the speed of light, and that has been weaponized. Got it? So that's what happened at Roswell. And has then been developed and deployed, and by 1965 we're on platforms in space targeting interstellar vehicles and downing them. That's why there have been many of them that have crashed. They don't, you know, these things don't come through intergalactic space and go, oops, I can't really navigate the jet stream and crash in the Andes, all right? So between 1965 and I'd say 95 or so, and that 30 years, there's a geosynchronous satellite net with detector systems that then track and target interstellar vehicles and can down them. Now, of course, the kill rate, to use a terrible term, military term, isn't 100%, but it's very dangerous. And so this is what's out of control in the deep black projects at the Pentagon, DIA, SAIC, EGNG, Raytheon. I know the guys who worked on this system. I'm not speculating here. So this then, you have to understand that what I'm talking about, the ET civilizations visiting here, might be very reluctant to interface too overtly in 3D, because once they step down the resonant frequency from transdimensional fields into 3D space-time, they're basically like shooting fish in a barrel at this point. And we need to stand those systems down. And that's what I've been asking. Actually, the central purpose of my meeting with the general who's in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency was to ask him to work to do that, but he was not briefed or read into those projects and had no access to them. They were beyond the reach of the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is basically a big operation like the CIA, but it's within the Pentagon. Have y'all heard this before? Anyway, I don't know how much of this you've heard, but it's very important for you to understand the milieu we're operating in. But going back to this concept of consciousness-assisted technology, so if you're connected and you see what you want to manifest. You can connect to a technology that creates this resonant and sonic, deep sonic field that then materializes that object. So not initially, but say, I don't know how many years into the future, we're not even going to need to be having mining operations or manufacturing or anything that damages the earth. It will simply be this kind of high-tech 4D, 5D manufacturing. Forget 3D manufacturing. So this is how they're doing it. Now, a very comical, sort of comic relief that kind of makes this very real for people. I don't know if this is too abstract, or I'm trying to articulate something that's a very advanced science in lay terms so that you can follow it. Do most people follow what I just shared? Yes. Yeah, okay. At the end of this session, we're going to have question and answer. You can drill down with your questions. We can clarify. We're going to try to take about an hour for question and answer this afternoon. If we have another mic. If not, you just shout it out and I'll repeat it. So there is this man, and Jacques Vallée actually reported this in a book, but he had a third-hand account. And back in the early 60s, there was a gentleman who was captain of a contract vessel for the Navy in the South Atlantic, where we were testing our intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so we were firing them down range, and his ship was to go in there and retrieve them and then mark where they hit and see how accurate their guidance systems were for hitting a target when we were trying to perfect. These are hydrogen bomb delivery, the missiles that are hydrogen bombs. And this man was on the captain of this contract vessel was equipped with brand new radar systems and what have you for tracking the missiles. Well, they kept having ET craft show up on it. And at this one point, it was one evening, there was one on radar, and his guy called him and says, look, I've got an unknown here on radar. And they called it into their control center, which unfortunately gave the military the ability to triangulate location. And they hit this object with one of these scalar weapons, and it dropped. He said they saw it drop just like a rock, thump, straight into the ocean. So he was vectored into the point of impact of this ET vehicle and got there first. And there were, the only thing left on the surface of the ocean was about a 6-foot ejection pod. And when they got it open, there were 4 extraterrestrial biological life forms, beings, people in it. And the rest of the craft had gone all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, which apparently was thousands of feet deep in that area. Whether they retrieved that, I'm sure at some point they did. So he was ordered to take it on board and put the bodies in the ship's freezer. But he started describing these little beings to me. He said, well, they were 39 inches tall, about a meter, very precise. They had the skin of a Sicilian. I'm quoting. I'm not trying to be racist or ethnic or this is an old, captain dude, salty guy. And they had a very attractive, he said they were handsome little men, but they had no hair and no pinna. This is the pinna, our chimpanzee ears. You like monkeys? We're monkeys, see. They didn't have pinna, but the openings. And they had a very fine sort of mouth and a very slight nose. Very, but he said they were quite attractive and beautiful eyes, almond-shaped eyes, white with a dark center. But they were all dead, unfortunately. And you're saying, what does this story have to do with what I was just sharing with you about consciousness-assisted technology and interstellar manufacturing? The reason this man called me, and Jacques Vallée never got a chance to actually talk to the captain of the ship. He heard it, I think, third hand, and had it in his book, Passport to Mogul, whatever it was. Passport to something. Yeah, Magonia. Well, this man was so freaked out Not by, I mean, of course, he was freaked out by the fact that there were ETs. He didn't know that at the time. And then a bunch of badass people came up in a submarine and surfaced by a ship and came on board and threatened everyone on the ship with death, termination, if they spoke of this. So much so that even when he had to have surgery at one point, and an intel person went into surgery when he got anesthesia to be sure he didn't speak of this. That's the folks I work with. I have several hundred men and women, a few women like that in my network. But he was too afraid to come forward publicly. He was convinced he'd be terminated. I told him he wouldn't be, but I can't force someone to take that risk. So, and I said, well, that's all I'm glad to have this information. He says, but that's not why I called. I said, well, really, why'd you call? And he said, well, I thought you might be the guy who can answer something that's been bugging me for 30 years, 30-some years. This was back in the 90s. I said, well, what's that? He says, these handsome little men had metallicized uniforms on, and we couldn't get them off. There were no zippers, and there were no buttons, and there was no way to put them on or off. I said, well, no, they don't need zippers and buttons because they use a sonic field that is created. And I described what I just described to all of you about how interstellar extraterrestrial civilizations that are transdimensional and interstellar and can go from one star system to here on Earth manufacture things. And I went very carefully through it. He says, oh my God, that's the only thing that makes sense. And that's the only reason he called me, because this had been bugging him for 30-some years. How the hell did they put these suits on and off? So it's these little things that stick in your mind if you're in a special operation like that, because it didn't make any sense. He'd get his mind around the fact there were ET craft. He could get his mind around the fact there were different people in the cosmos. He'd kind of looked into that after this happened. He couldn't wrap his mind around how these damn uniforms were put on and off. But now you know. And so does everyone listening. So, memo to Silicon Valley. You want to really do some high-tech stuff? Give me a jingle. SeriousDisclosure.com. Send a message. We'll do it. By the time my grandchildren are in one generation, we'll have a civilization that you won't look anything like ours. Let's do it. Yeah. Because I'm a pretty old guy now. I mean, I started this project when I was a young whippersnapper and 35 years old. I was talking to Michael the other night. It's kind of emotional. Imagine being 38 years old briefing the director of the CIA on this stuff. Yeah, that's a heavy lift for a 30-something. So, a heavy lift like you don't know what happened at that meeting. But, so, we have to figure out how to move this, or I have to pass this on to a generation because, I won't be around for more than another 30 or 40 years. We don't have 30 or 40 years anyway. We got to get this done sooner. But we need people to understand what the sciences are and also what the interface is between consciousness and mass consciousness making smooth this transition. Because this is the biggest change in the history of the human race. And the reason the remote view, what I'm going to teach you some of these techniques, the reason it's so important that you understand the power of the meditative state, that when an individual plugs into this expanded state of consciousness, but with other people, that they are harmonically friendly, loving, unified with, the effect is exponential versus one person. And they've done this again with the random number generator experiments. For example, if they have one person putting their awareness and intending it to spit out more ones than zeros, there's a certain effect. If there are two people that love each other or that are friends and connected and they do it, it's not twice as much, it's exponentially 10 times as much or whatever. And they've documented this. So imagine when there are hundreds of people like we have here and thousands listening, doing the meditation we did last night for the healing of the earth. Or on these long one-week trainings, I take people to the point where we go into the command center of the Cube at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works up here in the desert, or the Majority Committee on Intelligence, the so-called Majestic Group, and I name them, and I name the facilities and all the underground bases, and we go to them one by one, putting infinite love and infinite forgiveness and infinite light and this higher consciousness into every heart and soul. That's what we do. No anger, no hate. Forget that. That's the old. No problems ever solved by the consciousness that created it. Don't approach this from the point of anger and hate. Now, you can be strong, and you can be a spirit warrior, and don't be a wimp. Have courage, but don't give in. I sound like a Star Wars freak. Don't give in to the dark side of that. At the dark, Luke. So you want to stay with that positive, life-giving energy, even when you're dealing with people who are in these special operations, and that's how I roll. Without fear and without hate and with full forgiveness and understanding. Now, I mean, some people are just sociopathic or psychopathic enough, they're refractory to everything, and those are the hardliners in this group. But through what we've been doing with the Disclosure Project and our mass meditations and our contact, when I first briefed the director of the CIA, only about a third of this group was in favor of anything I was suggesting. Now it's 70%. It's a big. Now the other 25-30% are the hardcore psychopaths, sociopaths that just don't flat out kill and eat their own. And that's unfortunately what happened to Bill Colby, the CIA director who was helping me, in the 90s when he was going to hand off a free energy device and not a small amount, a moderate amount of seed funding, around $50 million, to get the technology out to the public massively, disclose it. And the week he was going to meet with a member of my board, they found him floating down the Potomac River. The problem with that is that he was not known to me at the time that he was killed. It was a blind date, and therefore we could not extend disclosure protection to him. Friends, let me listen carefully. Anyone listening, do not think you're going to be off the radar of the sector of the Intelligence Committee working tasked with this issue. No level of encryption, no level of patents, no level of spy versus spy talking in gibberish code over a phone is going to frustrate their knowing everything you're doing in real time. And the only protection there is strategic protection, which is massive disclosure and public transparency of everything you are doing. The quickest way to get killed doing this stuff is to do it secretively. If you do it in full view, you're completely safe. Why? Because the people who are in these covert programs, the last thing they want to do is be caught red-handed in a wet works operation. Wet works are assassinations. A wet works operation with the whole world watching. That's why I'm still alive. And there's a conscious aikido to this. You know, every CEO and high-tech person and billionaire I've met with wants to do the technology, monetize it, have patents, keep it secret, do the R&D in secrecy, like you're developing another piece of rubbish like this cell phone. It's just junk. It's of no real significance at all. Not going to change the world. It's a telephone that you can talk on, like in the 1800 or early 1900s, except it's wireless, using the same frequencies of a radio or what have you. It's nothing. It's nothing. Trillions of dollars into nothing. We're talking about doing something that's going to change the operating system of the whole planet in consciousness and conscious intelligence, but also consciousness-based technologies and technologies that are over unity, 0 point plugged into. And now that you can't do with the strategy of being in the box of venture capital. You have to basically create a different consciousness around that entire initiative. So if there are any high-tech people here or any high-net-worth people here, or you know of any, have them listen to this part of this weekend, because we have to help Gaia, who is being killed by us, the Earth, Mother Earth. And you cannot do it with a paradigm that's led to her destruction. So the paradigm of doing this as a intellectual property and secret, the only way you're going to get that out is if you convince this other hardcore element within the intelligence community and corporate world that they should give up thousands of trillions of dollars of asset-based utilities and coal and oil so that this happens, and they don't want to do that. And believe me, Bill Gates can't take on this multi-trillion-dollar element. Bill Gates has no money at all compared to these guys. So what can take them on? The masses of people knowing about it. The lab doing it is live streamed on the internet. It's done fully open source. And the instant you hit the sweet spot in the resonant frequencies of a free energy device, the entire world knows it, and dozens of academic centers reproduce it in real time. You squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube so hard and so fast, no one can put it back in, and the whole world knows about it at each step. In fact, if someone said, here's a $100 million venture capital fund, the first thing, and this is the plan I'm putting together, I've been meeting with people this week about this, and I've been sending emails this morning about it. So there's a few billion-dollar funds reaching out to us. They said they all have the wrong strategy, or most of them, because they're trying to recapitulate the model that works for a cell phone app. And I'm going, this isn't a cell phone app. You know, everyone thinks we build a better mousetrap and the world will be the path to your door. I said, no, Murder Incorporated is going to be the path to your door. And I have seen groups that have had $100 million and an operating device, and they've all vanished. Every single one of them. I watched this for 25 years. Why? They've done it secretively. They've done it with intellectual property or trade secrets. The public doesn't know they exist, and when that tree falls in the woods, nobody knows it. We would do it in a way so that if some goons came in to interfere with what we were doing, the whole world would know, and if they got in our way, I'd say, go and burn down the goddamn operations center here that did it. In other words, they're terrified of the public knowing about this and getting behind it. And so if you're developing a technology in secret or in confidence or with non-disclosure agreements in place or with whatever, you're on the playing field of the secrecy that these devils are the master of. They're the masters of that. And so it's like the National Reconnaissance Office that runs all the super secret spy satellite. They say, we own the night, if you go to their headquarters, over their headquarters. And I tell people, we need to own the light of disclosure, and doing this openly, transparently, for humanity. Now, the people say, well, then how would the people get an investment back on their funds? Well, first of all, if they're worried about an investment back, and they're already a billionaire, they probably have a mental illness. But... And don't want to just do something philanthropic for the world. But let's assume we want that. I said, let's have, because, I mean, come on. I mean, how much money do you need? I mean, geez, you know, I mean, after you have $100 million, you really can't spend it all before you're dead. And we're talking about thousands of billionaires today on the planet and tens of thousands of centimillionaires that have hundreds of millions. And these are the ones that are acknowledged. There are other people who are unacknowledged that have more. So look at it this way. Does everyone know what the internet is? You know how it came about? No, it wasn't Al Gore. When he said, I invented the internet, it was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration, and the Department of Defense developed it. By the way, they still run it, own it. It have penetrated it. But the internet, which is really very open source, everyone can get online for free, right? Or you pay a subscription. But the internet itself is free. And it's open source. Well, Linux is open source. But the that foundation of a technology, the internet, has then spawned applications, computers, apps, websites, e-commerce that are worth trillions of dollars. So what I'm trying to have these folks understand, and you can be my ambassadors to reach out to them, is let's do this as in place of DARPA. Because the government is not going to do this because they're hopelessly corrupt and penetrated by corrupting influences. It's the biggest RICO in the world, racketeering influence corrupt organization, right? It's the biggest mafia in the world. So the government is not going to do this ever. Therefore, there is no equivalent of a DARPA to do this for us. Therefore, let us create our own organization and entity that takes the place of DARPA to create this open source, 0-point, free energy platform where it's shared openly. And then that same group would then be able to take that knowledge and do all the thousands of vertical and horizontal applications. What do I mean by that? Look at the globe. There are 1 billion motor vehicles on the road. Every one of them need to have a free energy electric motor in them. You can't count the trillions of dollars that represents in manufacturing and development. Every single thing that takes energy, your heat pump, is being run not off the grid, but it has one of these systems built into it that heats and cools your house. Your home itself is running off a 0-point energy system. Well, you got 100, 200 million homes in America alone, but you take the whole world, you're talking about 1 billion homes that need this. This makes the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe look like nothing. And so people who are worried about, like a golem with my precious ring, my precious. No. That consciousness is just ridiculous. Not only will that get you killed, it won't succeed, and it's a childish strategy. And the reason it's childish is that if it's open source and you're there aren't enough corporations extant to retool and build up the infrastructure to replace the 1 billion motor vehicles, the 1 billion homes, and then every other, vertical, not just geographical, but vertical application. For example, this thing, you use it for a little while, it's dead. What if it had a miniaturized ZPE, solid state system in it, and there was no battery in it, or a tiny little one, just as sort of a discharging release of energy? It never has to be plugged in. Your PC never has to be plugged in. Your refrigerator's manufactured ships from the factory with a motor. It has a motor in it now, but it's a 0-point energy motor. All of those things are what I'm talking about, these different applications, any one of which is hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars in revenue, and those can then be patented. But the basic energy source and how it works needs to be open source. Does this make sense to folks? Yeah. Just like the internet is open source. And I'm trying to convince people who are high net worth CEOs, individuals, and also inventors to leave behind this spook model of keep it an intellectual property, have it a trade secret, we'll be so cute, we're going to outfox the secret government, we're going to take the patent for it and divide it into 100 patents and they won't know what we're doing. By the time you've had that thought and it's emanated from your cortex, classified projects know that's what you're going to do. And I'm not kidding, because they have technologies that are at that level of spyware. Therefore, leave that whole paradigm behind. Do it massively, do it open, do it now, do it yesterday. And then we'll regain, in a few years, the lost century. And we'll have a new civilization on Earth. Beautiful. That's what I recommend. Now, getting back to consciousness, I know I went on a sidebar, but I just wanted to say this because I can get off my chest. Therapy, you're my therapist also. You know. There's a lot of stress doing this, by the way. Yeah, it's the only person who knows is my wife, really. But we're in a position right now where if we have the plan to do that, we need the consciousness of all you folks doing it with us, not only watching, networking, but also in this meditative state, giving protection and guidance. And it works. It's like the power of non-locality of mind for prayer, intercessionary, all that really does work. They've done studies, and Larry Dossey, and who I know, have documented how that works. And so we need everyone to do this at every level, whether it's conscious, technological, financial, what have you. And that's what it's going to take to move the earth off of its path that is headed towards extinction onto a path that goes forward for 500,000 years of advanced civilization that becomes interstellar. And this is the choice. I call this the choice. And if we sit together and look at the world around us, it's really obvious that this is the choice. But we need to have people who articulate it. So all of you need to be ambassadors to the public articulating this. This is why I'm trying to give you the lexicon and the concepts, so you can go out there and explain this or share this video with folks. And the remote viewing capability is also important to guiding this path. Most of what I've achieved personally in my life was seen in a lucid dream or a meditative state before I ever spoke of it or did it. All of it, starting when I was 18. And in fact, when I started the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, I was in a deep meditative state at night. I was actually in this big house we had in the upstairs master bedroom den with a fireplace, and I was on the futon because we had little babies who were up, and I had to work a 24-hour nonstop shift in the ER. Ugh. But so I was in that room, and I was going to sleep, and I was meditating, and suddenly I went into the state of consciousness, and in the right-hand corner of the room, to the right of the fireplace, was this beautiful golden white spherical object. And it was interstellar, but also cosmic conscious, God consciousness level of, these are the primogenitors of life on Earth, from whence we have come. And I connected to this conscious communication sphere and just mind melded with it, sat up and wrote down everything that's happened from now till then, everything we've done. That's how it happened. That was in 1990. August of 1990. So that's what each of us can do in our lives. And it's something that gives so much power to what you're doing and so much safety, but also effectiveness and efficiency. So if you're wanting to be on a CE... Hello? Yeah, if you're wanting to be on a CE5 contact team, this is what you really want to do. You want to be able to be in this state of consciousness, go back to what we were talking about 45 minutes ago, this flow consciousness of joy, and remote view distant places or the ground around you or underneath the ground, because they can be underneath the ground, and connect to those beings and invite them into a meeting, and then see how it happens, how it unfolds. It may be 3D, it may be 4th D, it may be 10th D, it may be electronic, it may be visual, it may be an orb, it may be a full spacecraft, it may be an extraterrestrial biological being that materializes right there outside your circle or inside your circle. Everything I've just said has happened on these expeditions. But it doesn't really matter how they appear. The key is to understand why. What does it take on the part of the team? So the team needs to be able to have this understanding of consciousness as operative, and you become proficient in meditation, and then proficient in the ability to have your eyes open and at the same time remote viewing, and also be coherent as a team. That last thing is a very difficult one because of the human ego structure. I tell people you don't need the cast of thousands out with you. You can do it by yourself, but I actually recommend that it be with anywhere from 3 to 8 people. You get bigger groups than that, the ability to get coherence and where everyone's on the same page decreases exponentially. It's just the nature of it has to do, unless they're incredibly evolved large group. It's very hard to find. So I recommend a smaller group to go out and do this and work on this together, as opposed to a great big group. And when you get into that coherence together and deep consciousness together, it is an exponential increase in the attraction that the interstellar civilizations will have to you, because they're looking for not just individuals today to contact, they want groups of people, because that's setting up the morphogenic field for all of society to have contact. You understand? We're the pioneers, we're the tip of the arrow. And we're creating that waveform by doing this as a group. That's why I started the CE5 initiative in 1990. And as we do that, as in a group format, it begins to model in deep consciousness, subconscious levels, and affects all of human society to be able to accept contact openly without fear and without it running into the Star Wars scenario. So the power of the CE5 effort is based in this group coherence. This is making sense to folks? And that's what I want you to understand. And sometimes small is beautiful. A smaller group of people is really very effective. So wherever you live, you can get on our website, seriousdisclosure.com, and you'll see that there's a free app that you can download to see where there are other people in your area. Now, memo there. Those of you joining it who don't put an email address in or a text number or something, there's no way for someone to get hold of you. So go back in there and put in, even just get a Hotmail account or open another account just for that, so that people can network together. That's the whole point of the app. But if you look at that, there are now people on every continent and all over the world, thousands. And so you can find people wherever you live to do this. I don't care if you're in India or Africa or Argentina. It's amazing. When we launched it a couple years ago, I just saw the whole world light up with the CSETI triangle logos on all continents. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So that kind of mass consciousness is what's happening. Now imagine if that's happening when we do this, and we're going to try to incorporate this entanglement app that Adam Curry is working on into our new training app, the CSETI training app, which is a separate app. There's a small fee to get downloaded. Most of it goes to the iTunes stores and the app developer, very little to us. But it will have in it these tools, like a built-in random number generator training system for you developing this non-locality of consciousness and ability to affect as a consciousness-assisted technology. And we're very excited. I mean, the conversations I've had with Adam Curry are that there's enormous synchronicity in him rolling that system out now when we're wanting to start a second version of our contact app. In the meanwhile, there are things that you can do meditation-wise and practice-wise to sharpen your remote viewing ability. And that's what I want to go through. Some of these sort of exercises, all right? They're all really very beautiful and simple, and they're really based on, they're limited by your imagination and how many of these you can set up. And in fact, let me just say something. Every opportunity, everything that happens, every event stimulus that happens in your life every day is an opportunity to use non-locality of consciousness to sharpen your skills. What do I mean by that? The phone rings. Instead of looking at the caller ID, take a second between the second ring and the third to sense and feel who's calling. Seriously, there's a knock on the door. Before you open it to look, sense, feel with your heart, your mind, your senses, your conscious field that is omnipresent, who is it? You see what I'm saying? You're driving down the highway someplace you've never been. What does around that curve and over that mountain, what am I going to see when I get there? Now, I call this on-the-fly remote viewing, real-time remote viewing, where you begin to live and practice that, mindfulness. It's really fun. It's playful. It's fun. And the more you do it, you'll find that the time frame of your accuracy begins you collapse time frames, and your accuracy goes up exponentially. Mainly, people don't do it because they're too lazy to change their habitual way of doing things. Yogananda once said, mainly the reason people don't develop spiritually is spiritual lassitude, laziness, and a lack of spiritual adventuresomeness. So be adventuresome and be playful. And you will find that once you understand what consciousness is, there's almost an infinite number of opportunities in any given day to practice this ability. Now, there are spectacular peak experiences, like seeing a brain tumor in someone and saving their life. I'm glad I was able to save that man's life. But there are other things that maybe seem trivial, but they help you develop and sharpen that ability. And here's the beauty of that. When you begin to give yourself to it freely and let it be flow consciousness coming through you in a playful, childlike way, when you get a correct remote view and intuition, and it gets fed back to you, that's positive feedback loop. And the more that happens, the more you go, I can do this. This is real. Oh my God. You see what I mean? And then that heightens your confidence, and the more confident and relaxed you are that you can do it, the more you'll be able to do it more and more. So it begins to snowball. And that's what I found when I was a teenager. When I started practicing these things, these techniques, and having these experiences, when I would have something that would happen that would be very accurate, I'd go, wow, that does work. And then it happened again. And I then became going, well, then I had no question I could do it. And once all doubt leaves your mind, and you actually believe in the truest sense of the word, it's not just believe, you know. It's a knowingness that this is possible. And you affirm it, then there's no stopping what you can do. Don't look to me and people, or Ingo Swann, or Guru this, or Maharishi that, or Dalai Lama here, or whatever, to do this for you. I always tell people, don't do this spiritual codependency trip. The last thing I ever want to be is a guru or whatever, where people are going and, they do this for me. I said, well, go do it for yourself, you lazy sack. No, I mean, I do actually, even when I'm leading things, I'm actually going into each individual and augmenting it. And that's what a teacher does. But, so last night, I'm sure a lot of you may have felt that. But I've done this for decades, actually. But you really want to own this yourself, because you don't want to have another person be a crutch for you. The other thing is, don't think that just because you're not Ingo Swann. Anybody know who Ingo Swann was? The guy who was a very fantastic remote viewer, but got taken in by SRI in the military. And I used to spend time with him at his home before he passed away. And brilliant man, very intuitive, incredibly accurate, but he regretted. I have a beautiful letter from him where he's talking about what we're doing with the CSETI, Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative, was the ultimate application, taking seriously not only the ET presence, but utilizing it in a way that's incredibly practical and the highest application of this science of consciousness to the world situation and to the cosmic moment we're in. He loved it. And one of my problems is when people look at the folks like that, they sort of then idolize them as somebody that's it's like an inventor trying to find an element that doesn't exist. I call it unobtainium. So this is not attainable. This is unobtainium. And they get into that mindset. And this is the danger of people who are put forward as adepts, because it steals the power from people of thinking that they can do everything that they're doing. So look at it this way. Anything I've done, anything a Vedic master has done, anything that the Dalai Lama can do, anything that Ringo Swan did, every single one of you can do. Every single one of you. And don't give me any excuses. No excuses. So feel that you are capable of doing this. Have a very positive, playful approach to it, and you can do it. Now, I'm going to share in a moment a few of these sort of techniques. And when you're first starting out, most people need some things to just sharpen their ability. And I want to go through over the next half hour or so, and then we'll take a break. Sort of the atmospherics of this first, and then a few little techniques.